For millions of families in the 1990s, Home Improvement was more than a sitcom. The sound of Tim Taylor yelling on tool time and the laughter around the Taylor dinner table became part of growing up. But while the reruns still feel frozen in time, the real lives behind the cast changed in ways many fans never expected. Before we begin, which character do you remember most? When Home Improvement premiered in 1991, Tim Allen was 38 years old and still new to television fame. But what made audiences connect with him so quickly was that Tim Taylor never felt polished or perfect. He was loud, reckless, stubborn, and constantly making mistakes. Yet viewers still saw something honest underneath the comedy. That honesty came from Allen's real life. Long before sitcom success, Tim Allen's future nearly collapsed after he was arrested on drug trafficking charges in the late 1970s. The case led to prison time, something Allen later spoke about openly as the lowest point of his life. For many people, that story would have ended there. Instead, prison became the turning point that forced him to rebuild himself completely. After his release, Allen turned to stand-up comedy. His jokes about marriage, frustration, tools, and everyday life connected with working-class audiences who felt like he understood them. Slowly, those comedy routines evolved into the personality that would later define Tim Taylor on Home Improvement. By the mid-1990s, the show became one of the biggest sitcoms in America. Millions of families gathered every week to watch Tim accidentally destroy appliances, argue with Jill, or embarrass his sons with endless confidence. At the same time, Allen's career exploded even further when he became the voice of Buzz Lightyear in Toy Story. Very few actors have ever balanced two iconic franchises at once, but Tim Allen suddenly became part of both television and animation history. Behind the scenes, however, fame did not erase personal struggles. His first marriage eventually ended after years together, something Allen later reflected on with honesty and regret. Over time, he remarried and seemed more focused on stability, family life, and personal growth than chasing celebrity culture. As decades passed, audiences also began seeing him differently. His story slowly became less about sitcom comedy and more about redemption. He had survived prison, public scrutiny, changing Hollywood trends, and the pressure of aging in front of millions of people. Now in his early 70s in 2026, Tim Allen represents something increasingly rare in entertainment, a flawed man who rebuilt his life and somehow remained connected to generations of viewers along the way. If Tim Allen brought the chaos to Home Improvement, Patricia Richardson brought the emotional heart. When Richardson began playing Jill Taylor in 1991, she was 40 years old and already an experienced actress. But what made Jill unforgettable was how real she felt. Compared to many sitcom mothers of the era, she was patient but exhausted, loving but firm, supportive while still demanding respect from her husband and children. While Tim Taylor created the loud comedy, Jill grounded the show emotionally. Richardson made sure the character never became just another sitcom wife reacting to jokes. Jill felt intelligent, independent, and believable, which helped families connect deeply with the series during the 1990s. Many viewers, especially parents, saw pieces of their own lives in her. She balanced work, motherhood, stress, and marriage in ways that felt surprisingly authentic for network television at the time. After Home Improvement ended, Richardson made a choice that surprised Hollywood. Instead of aggressively chasing more fame, she focused more on family and personal life. She continued acting occasionally, but she avoided becoming trapped inside the pressure of constantly trying to remain a television star. That decision eventually became part of her legacy. While many celebrities fought desperately against aging, Richardson seemed comfortable stepping away from the spotlight and living more privately. Over time, audiences respected her even more for that honesty. Now in her mid-70s in 2026, Patricia Richardson remains one of the most believable television mothers of her generation. And for many fans revisiting Home Improvement today, Jill Taylor still feels less like a sitcom character and more like someone they once knew in real life. By the mid-1990s, Jonathan Taylor Thomas had become one of the biggest teen idols in America. When Home Improvement first started, he was only 10 years old, playing Randy Taylor, the smart, funny middle brother who quickly became a fan favorite. But as the show grew larger, so did Jonathan's fame. Soon, his face covered teen magazines, posters filled bedroom walls, and millions of young fans saw him as one of the most recognizable stars of the decade. At the same time, he expanded beyond Home Improvement with movie roles and voice acting work, including young Simba in Disney's The Lion King. For many kids growing up in the 1990s, Jonathan Taylor Thomas seemed to be everywhere, but behind the popularity was enormous pressure. Unlike many young celebrities who embraced non-stop fame, Jonathan often appeared uncomfortable with how intense the public attention had become. While fans admired him as the perfect teen star, he was still trying to grow up normally while cameras and interviews followed him everywhere. Then came the decision that shocked Hollywood. At the height of his fame, Jonathan stepped away from acting. Instead of chasing bigger movie roles or trying to become an adult superstar, he chose education and privacy instead. Over time, he studied at schools including Harvard and Columbia, slowly disappearing from the celebrity world that once surrounded him constantly. That choice only made audiences more curious about him. Many former teen idols spend years trying to reclaim lost attention, but Jonathan Taylor Thomas seemed determined to live quietly outside Hollywood. He occasionally reunited with Tim Allen for small television appearances, reminding fans he had not vanished completely, but he never fully returned to fame. Now in his mid-40s in 2026, Jonathan remains one of the biggest symbols of 1990s nostalgia. But unlike many child stars, his story is not remembered for scandal or collapse. Instead, fans remain fascinated because he walked away while he was still on top. And while Jonathan Taylor Thomas became the heartthrob of home improvement, Richard Karn became something just as important: the comforting presence audiences trusted every week. When Karn first appeared as Al Borland, he was 35 years old and relatively unknown. But his chemistry with Tim Allen immediately worked. Al was calm where Tim was reckless, patient where Tim was loud, and smart enough to rescue Tool Time from disaster almost every episode. What made Al so memorable was his quiet humor. Richard Karn mastered reactions, awkward silence, and subtle comedy that perfectly balanced Tim Allen's chaotic energy. Together, the two actors created one of the most beloved sitcom friendships of the 1990s. Off-screen, Karn and Ellen also became real friends, which made their scenes feel even more natural. Viewers could sense the genuine warmth between them, and it helped Home Improvement feel more authentic than many sitcoms of the era. After the show ended, Karn successfully transitioned into hosting Family Feud and other television projects. Audiences already saw him as approachable and dependable, so the move felt completely natural. Even years later, many fans still instantly recognize him as Al Borland in his flannel shirts, patiently dealing with Tim Taylor's endless chaos. Now in his late 60s in 2026, Richard Karn represents the comforting side of television nostalgia. He never became a tabloid celebrity or chased controversy. Instead, he remained exactly what audiences always loved him for: steady, familiar, and easy to welcome back into the living room after all these years. But as warm and comforting as Home Improvement still feels today, not every story behind the cast had a happy Hollywood ending. One of the youngest stars from the series experienced a life journey far different from what fans imagined, and for many viewers it became the most emotional transformation of all. When Home Improvement began, Taran Noah Smith was only 7 years old. As Mark Taylor, he played the quiet youngest brother, surrounded by constant noise, jokes, and chaos inside the Taylor household. For many viewers growing up in the 1990s, Mark represented the innocence of childhood itself. But growing up on one of the biggest sitcoms in America came with pressure most children could never fully understand. By the time the series ended in 1999, Smith had spent nearly his entire childhood in front of cameras. Unlike many actors who tried desperately to stay famous afterward, he walked away from Hollywood while still very young. Fans assumed he would eventually return, but his life moved in a completely different direction. As he entered adulthood, Smith became involved in a public dispute surrounding his trust fund and finances. The situation attracted major media attention because audiences still remembered him as the innocent youngest Taylor brother. But behind the headlines was a deeper reality. Many former child actors faced trying to separate their real identity from the version millions of viewers remember forever. Instead of staying inside the entertainment industry, Smith explored alternative lifestyles and unusual business ventures far removed from sitcom fame. He became interested in vegan food projects, sustainable living, and building a life outside celebrity culture. To many fans, the transition felt surprising, but for Smith, it often seemed like an attempt to discover who he really was beyond television. What makes his story emotional is not scandal, but contrast. Audiences remember Mark Taylor frozen in childhood, while the real person behind the role spent years trying to escape that image and build a private life of his own. Now in his early 40s, in 2026, Taran Noah Smith remains one of the most unexpected stories connected to Home Improvement. His journey may not look like traditional Hollywood success, but it reveals something very real about the cost of growing up famous too early. And while Taran Noah Smith's story reflected the difficult side of childhood fame, another cast member left behind one of the warmest legacies in television history. For millions of fans, Wilson was never just a neighbor standing behind a fence. He became the quiet soul of home improvement. When Earl Hindman first appeared on the series in 1991, he was already an experienced actor in his late 40s. But nobody expected a character whose face was partially hidden every episode to become one of the most beloved parts of the show. Whenever Tim Taylor created another disaster in his life, Wilson calmly appeared with thoughtful advice, wisdom, and patience that balanced the chaos around him. What made Wilson unforgettable was not the running joke about hiding his face. It was the comfort he brought to viewers. In a sitcom filled with noise and comedy, Wilson represented calm reflection and emotional honesty. Off-screen, Earl Hindman was deeply respected by the cast and crew. Many described him as thoughtful, intelligent, and genuinely kind, qualities audiences could feel in every scene he shared with Tim Allen. Sadly, Hindman passed away from lung cancer in 2003 at only 61 years old. For longtime fans, his death felt deeply personal because Wilson had become connected to childhood memories, family evenings, and life lessons that still stayed with viewers years later. Even today, more than 2 decades after his passing, Wilson remains one of television's most unique characters. Audiences may never have fully seen his face, but they connected completely with his humanity. And perhaps that is why Earl Hindman is still missed so much today. Watching Home Improvement today feels different than it did in the 1990s. Back then, it was just a family sitcom people laughed at after dinner. But over time, the show became something more, a reminder of childhood. Old living rooms, simpler television nights, and the feeling of growing up alongside the Taylor family. The reruns still look frozen in time, but the real people behind those characters changed just like the audience did. Some found peace away from fame. Some struggled with growing up in public. And some, like Earl Hindman, left behind memories that now feel even more meaningful with time. Maybe that is why Home Improvement still matters after all these years. It reminds viewers not only of the cast, but also of who they were when they first watched the show. So now we want to hear from you. Which Home Improvement cast member changed the most in your eyes? And which character still brings back the strongest memories today? If this video brought back part of your childhood, don't forget to subscribe for more Than Now stories about the classic television shows and stars that shaped generations.